We've been hearing in the last hour from the leadership at Rand Water as people in areas such as Johannesburg and the capital, Tshwane, face another day of water restrictions. As things stand, they say the infrastructure is being worked on as far as improvements are necessary, but water is available in the dams. The issue is making sure what's available is able to last even through the periods where South Africa is not getting enough rain. Take a listen to the comments by the CEO earlier.
Essentially, if you look at the Public Finance Management Act, we are classified as a Schedule 3B outfit. What does that mean? We are a state-owned entity. We are a business enterprise. What is important is that we must generate our own income and be self-sufficient. In our history of 119 years, we have not gotten a cent from the department. We don't get grants. We are on our own in terms of these pieces of legislation. So we are self-funded. We don't get any allocation from the National Fiscus, from National Treasury. We don't have an allocation in terms of divisions of a Revenue Act. It's not really applicable to us. We are on our own. We are a trading entity.
Musia says the reduction in water supply is not caused by Rand Water cutting supply, but rather other factors which have led to the problem.
And when we talk restrictions, we're not talking restrictions to reduce. We're talking restrictions to say we have put more water. What we have now, we have to manage differently. Because you'll see later on, if we empty all our reservoirs, we just have no water, no head, no pressure to supply all the high-lying areas. So when we talk about this curtailment, or rather we call it curtailment, not water shedding. When you're talking about water curtailment, we are saying leave it here. We have put more. Beyond this, there's just not enough infrastructure. We have provided water. We have planned for the peak. We have put more water into the system, more than what we had planned for in the peak season. So we have come to a point where we don't want the system to crash and leave everybody without water. Let us use what we have. Let us share it. Let's use it responsibly until such time we get out of heat waves, until such time that it starts raining, until such time that we started seeing less and less of water usage, drinking water usage to water the lawns. Until such time that we get out of that, given the amount of water that we are providing, we are saying let us make sure that this water that we put into the system is used sparingly.
Our reporter at the Rand Water briefing was Mohlaoli, who joins us now live. Tumaole, we know the problem. How long will it take to fix it?
Well, that seems to be, of course, the main conundrum in terms of trying to find a lasting solution to this problem. And this is something that, of course, has been high on the agenda in terms of government's own plans and strategies. Of course, the CEO of Rand Water also giving us an indication that they have met, of course, with the Water Affairs Ministry earlier this week to try and find exactly what will be happening. And what is of key concern there is this issue of infrastructure. While, of course, the water reservoirs and the dams are at full capacity and there is water supply, the transformation and transference of that water to our taps in the local municipalities, it seems to be the issue. But let's talk about the broader issue of the infrastructure now. To help me unpack that, I'm joined by Professor Johan Tempelhof, who's a water expert and, of course, a published author dealing with this issue of South Africa's water crisis and challenges. Professor Tempelhof, thank you very much for speaking to us on Newzroom Afrika. Now, we heard in the briefing about the issue that our reservoirs and dams are full, but it's the issue of getting this water to the taps of people like you and I. What are some of the key challenges preventing this?
Right now, the memories of the most recent drought are still alive in our minds, especially amongst the water specialists. Moreover, we are living in a time of climate change. That was stressed twice by Mr. Masai in his speech and his presentation today. And it is because they want to be careful. They want water for all, forever, not water for some only now. So it's a long-term strategy they're working on, and it's a conservation demand management strategy. And also I think ultimately it's an objective to try and avert a crisis, an environmental crisis. Because when water consumers, you and I, run out of water in the urban areas, where do we get water from? So it's better to look after your tap water instead of using it on your lawns. That was the message that I got from what he was saying, in layman's term, for us to consider.
Now, Prof, another issue is that that came across very strongly is the fact that South Africa does not necessarily have its own, if one can say, sustainable, bottomless water supply, and we get our water primarily from Lesotho, which is something of an eye-opener. How do we manage that particular supply to ensure that, of course, the water is well distributed and that it's not abused or does not fall by the wayside when it comes to the infrastructure challenges? Okay,
now South Africa is among the 40 most water-stressed countries in the world. The average rainfall countries have, as usual, as normal, is 850 millimeters per annum. In South Africa, we are around 660 millimeters. And as you saw on the maps this morning, South Africa is extremely arid in the west, and it sort of moistures up to the east. But the main problem is distributing that water, and it's not sufficient. Our annual rain supplies are not always sufficient to carry all our water needs. So we can't say this year's water is going to be sufficient. And that is what they are trying to be careful of. Remember also that 25% of South Africa's population lives in Gauteng province. So when we talk about 17.1 million people relying on Randwater's water, you can understand why they have their braces and their belts on to ensure that we don't consume too much.
And 30% of this water is wasted through leaks. When one considers that, I think about the situation, for instance, when you look at what's happening in Katoris area, the east rand of the Gauteng province, both on the side of conservation in terms of leaks and wastage, but also as perhaps even a source. Do you think it's something that's credible? Because we hear about these aquifers that are groundwater sources. Why aren't those being exploited?
Right. Now, working on aquifers is very dicey in urban areas. You can have wastewater flowing in there. You can have acid mine drainage flowing in there. So you can rest assured that Randwater won't touch on anything that is not pure. So they want pristine water. Point number one. They will import groundwater from elsewhere if need be, but they will not compromise the quality of their water. In the case of local authorities, especially in informal areas where you have lots of informal settlements and overpopulation, you have people reusing a single bath, for example, in Ekurhuleni, 3 times before they pour that water out. And then they fetch that water somewhere probably 50 to 100 meters from their houses. So Randwater is aware of that. The municipalities are aware of that. So they try to be lenient. Ultimately, it boils down to the fact that Randwater has determined that 40% of the water municipalities receive from Randwater goes lost. It vanishes into the soil. And that is what they want to try and combat. Ultimately, getting local authorities to improve their water infrastructure systems so that we can conserve vitally important water resources.
Right. Professor, we'll have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you very much for your views. That was, of course, Professor Johan Tempelhof, who is a published author on this particular issue of water conservation, just off the back of that particular briefing by, of course, the CEO of Randwater, and giving us a very detailed outlook. 40% of the water that is produced, or rather set aside and earmarked for public consumption, lost also to the issue of infrastructure mismanagement or infrastructure degradation, something that the national government is aware of and that municipalities are working, we are told, tirelessly to try and, of course, combat. But for you and I, as ordinary citizens, what we can do, we can rather try to reduce our water usage, take a shower if you can, or try and water your plants when it is closer to dusk, so you can use less water, and that the water that you use does not necessarily get lost to evaporation. And also wash your cars sparingly. Instead of splashing it with a hose pipe, use a bucket where you can. So these are some of the things that we can do to try and contribute to conserving this very rare and very precious resource. With that, it's back to you in the studio, Tembegile.
Thank you very much for that, Tumaole Mohlaoli.